Hello, today we have some great tips for you for the month of November, but I also want to share some tips with you for the winter months as we go into December and January. But first, let's start with some of those November tips. For those of you that are continuing to maintain cool season grasses in your landscape, now would be a time to apply maybe another pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, and this will be your last application of fertilizer to your cool season grasses until next spring. Also, this is a good time to continue to control broadleaf weeds in both your warm and cool season grasses. Now with your cool season grasses, you'll want to continue to mow as needed at about 2 inches. And if we go through some drier spells, be sure to irrigate your turf as well. Now of course, this is the time of year when all the leaves start falling, and especially on your cool season grasses, you want to keep that leaf litter off of the turf to help prevent damage to the foliage. And what I like to do when it's like this, it's just kind of a light cover of leaves, is just take your mulching mower, run over it, chops it up into small pieces and drops it down to the ground. If it gets a little heavier, I might actually capture the leaves in a bag and then take those chopped up leaves and throw them in the compost pile, or use them as a mulch in the garden somewhere. Or if we have an open bed, annual bed or vegetable bed, we can throw them out in those beds, till them in. That's adding organic matter to those beds. Now for perennials in the landscape, such as these chrysanthemums here, as the plants go dormant for the winter months, go ahead and leave the foliage in place. This helps protect the crown of the plant from the harsh winter months. Now if the plants have been heavily infested with insects or diseases, you might go ahead and remove those this fall and get them out of the garden so you're not harboring those pests. Now for spring flowering bulbs such as tulips and daffodils, etc., you can still plant those through the middle of November. And there are actually several species, tulips, hyacinths, some of the paper whites, and other narcissus that can be potted up in containers, brought indoors, forced to bloom indoors to provide some color. For trees and shrubs in the landscape, especially deciduous trees and shrubs, the early winter months is an excellent time to do some pruning if needed, for structural purposes, to help take out limbs that might be rubbing across each other, competing with each other, or for safety reasons. If you have a broken limb or one that's dying that might need to come out so it doesn't fall on somebody or something and cause some damage. Now this is also a good time as we go into the winter months and the leaves have fallen, to apply a dormant oil to help protect the trees from insects such as scale and aphids. Those can be applied to deciduous plants, but don't apply them to evergreens. And the temperatures do need to be above 40 degrees when you apply those. Now for thin-barked trees, smooth and young, smooth, thin-barked trees such as this linden right here, you can see this bark is really exposed to the low angle of the winter sun. And as the temperatures get colder and the sun beats down against this trunk, it will heat it up and cause the sap to start moving. It kind of breaks dormancy a little bit. And then when the sun goes down and the temperatures drop really cold, it can cause cracks, freezing cracks in the bark, which causes damage, which could lead to some stress and maybe attack from diseases and insects. So what we want to do then is apply a tree wrap. And this is really easy to do. This paper wrap here is really cheap, and it can be easily applied. We're going to start at the bottom of the tree and wrap it around the trunk somewhat loosely, and overlapping as we go kind of provides somewhat of a shingle effect. And we're going to go ahead and wrap this tree all the way up to the first set of branches to help protect this tree through the winter months. Now I mentioned wrapping of young trees or newly planted trees, or any plant that you might be concerned about that bark being damaged. And that wrap should stay on through the winter months and then taken off again in early spring. I also mentioned pruning of deciduous trees and shrubs, but you want to be sure not to prune spring flowering trees and shrubs at this time. Wait until after they have bloomed in the spring to do any pruning. Now fruit trees also is a group of plants that you don't want to prune right now. These are usually pruned in February, March, just prior to bud break. Now as we continue on into the winter months, I mentioned there's other tasks that you can do. You may have some leftover garden seed. Now would be the time to put that into airtight containers and store them in the refrigerator or freezer so that you can reuse them. If they're older than 3 years, then it might be a good idea to go ahead and discard those and start anew. Now, as we go into the winter months, if we have another really dry winter, it's a good idea to water your landscape, irrigate your landscape if you can, on occasion, because cold, dry soils can be just as damaging as the colder air temperatures. So if temperatures are above freezing, we need to irrigate our landscapes if there hasn't been any precipitation of any kind for several weeks. Even deciduous trees or dormant plants will transpire during the winter, so they can be damaged if the soils are really dry. We want to pay particular attention to broadleaf and needle-leafed evergreens, also plants that might be planted up against a building where they'd be protected from the eave of the building. That area will stay dry even though there might be some precipitation. And raised beds, they can dry out a little bit quicker. If you have plants growing in those, you want to make sure you irrigate them. If there is a forecast for a really hard freeze, and again, the soil's been dry, if you can irrigate at least 24 hours in advance, that helps moisten the soil and helps protect those plants. Now, as we are forced indoors with the colder temperatures, it's a good idea or a good time to sit down and start browsing through the seed and mail order catalogs and plan for next year. Also, it's a great time to sit down and start designing and making plans for new structural changes or new designs that you want to put in the landscape.